Welcome to Riding Counsel with Rich Jaffe, where the open road meets expert advice. I'm Richard Jaffe, an attorney and biking enthusiast, and this is the podcast where we dive into the world of motorcycling, safety, culture, charitable giving, and riding right. So, whether you're a seasoned rider or just getting started, let's talk bikes, the road, and everything in between. Let's ride!
Hello and welcome to Law Office of Cohen and Jaffe, personal injury attorneys. My name is Kevin Rosenquist. I am your host, and I'm here with Richard Jaffe, partner at Cohen and Jaffe, a personal injury attorney. Richard, welcome.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me here. And I'm really excited to talk a lot about the personal injury world. And of course, you could find me at cohenjaffe.com, CohenJaffe.com. And like you said, I practice personal injury mostly in New York, but I have done a lot of cases around the country. So I'm really excited to talk about different aspects of personal injury, trials, accidents, all the stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. We're talking something that's important for riders to understand, and that is economic versus non-economic damages after a motorcycle accident. So, for any riders who might not be familiar with legal terms, can you explain what you mean by damages as it pertains to personal injury?
Okay, let me backtrack a little bit. Negligence, the concept of negligence, okay, it's a fancy word that a lot of attorneys like to throw around and even regular people, but they don't know exactly what it means. Negligence is when somebody does something wrong. And just because somebody is negligent doesn't mean you get to sue them. There has to be some sort of damages, not only damages, but the damages have to be caused as a result of the negligence. So when we're talking about damages, this is what we're really centering in on when you're talking about economic and non-economic damages. There's these two aspects. So essentially, non-economic damages is something like pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, anything that you really can't quantify. That's non-economic damages. Economic damages is everything you can quantify very easily. Something like a hospital bill, a doctor bill, loss of wages. All these things can be documented, and we can come up with a finite number to present not only to insurance adjusters or defense counsel, but most importantly, judges and juries to get a fixed number where we could say, hey, as a result of the fact that somebody here did something wrong, meaning the defendant, the plaintiff, my client, has suffered both economic and non-economic damages. So of the two, I would say it's much harder to convince a jury about non-economic damages, because economic damages, there's this collateral evidence, if you will. There's supporting evidence. I could bring a doctor bill in. I could bring a hospital bill in. I could show medical records. For lost wages, I could either bring a tax return in, or I could bring in a W-2 into court, or I could even bring in somebody to testify that, look, the plaintiff, whoever that might be, my client, has worked for us for X amount of years, and this is how much we pay them. And as a result of the accident, they weren't able to work in their full capacity. And because of that, they lost a lot of money because of their lack of work. So that's all economic damages. The non-economic is really something that has to be proven and a jury convinced of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's calculations you can do, obviously, like you said, bills and whatnot for economic, but non-economic, there's just a little more gray area there. So can you share some examples of non-economic damages that riders might not realize they could claim?
Yeah, sure. And when we're talking riders, I'm a motorcyclist myself. I love to ride motorcycles, okay? But it happens with car accidents, truck accidents, even slips and trips and falls. So it's any kind of accident where somebody is at fault, and as a result of the fact that that person did something wrong, you suffer what we're going to be talking about here is non-economic damages. And non-economic damages has to do with pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, even loss of guidance. Because if, let's say, a father gets hurt, then that injury really ripples into his entire family, meaning that if the father is unable to go to a baseball game, let's say, or if the father of these kids is unable to help the children pick a college or something, these things are something that we call loss of guidance. But non-economic damages is pain and suffering. That's really where it comes down to, and loss of enjoyment of life. And that's going to be different for everyone. So for instance, if I say to you, hey, I have my ring finger got hurt in this accident, right? And I sprained it. And it's going to take a while to heal up, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. You're thinking, okay, it's probably not worth a lot because it's his ring finger and it's going to
Right.
heal up in a couple of months and there's no fracture there. So it's going to be okay. So it's really, I'm going to present it to a jury and it's not worth a lot. But what if I told you that person who injured their ring finger is a trumpet player, and that trumpet player is a professional trumpet player, and as a result of the damages to this trumpet player, to his ring finger, he can't play the trumpet. So now, where one person has injured their ring finger and they really don't use their ring finger a lot, the trumpet player who injured the ring finger, the same exact injury, is worth a lot more. So that's going to impact the non-economic part of these damages that I present to a jury, because it means a lot to him. Now, we're not talking about loss of wages, okay, because that's the economic side. Okay, that's
Oh, good
another
point.
component.
Good point.
But the non-economic part has to do with loss of enjoyment, because this person, as a professional, loves what he does, loves playing trumpet, and now can't as a result of an injury to his ring finger.
I mean, it's got to be really difficult to prove a non-economic damage, especially as far as putting a number on it, a dollar amount. How do you go down? How do you handle that?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of controversy surrounding what non-economic damages are, and all you hear on the radio, at least, and on TV, are all these claims that there's runaway juries and they're giving away money and they're giving away
Mhm.
millions. But you have to understand that juries get instructions about this, and the instructions from the judge is specifically that non-economic damages have to be fair, they have to be reasonable, and they have to be just. Okay, so while the jury does have a guide in that sense to decide what these non-economic damages are, meaning pain and suffering and the like, they do have these three words as a guide, right? Fair, reasonable, and just. And if it's not, then you have to understand that there are appeals courts that will reduce the verdict. So there are mechanisms, systems of checks and balances. So really, these people who say that there's these runaway juries, there's really not runaway juries, because everything is really controlled, and there are methods to make sure that it is fair, reasonable, and just. But it is up to the attorney, somebody like me, to present evidence to a jury about the pain, about the suffering that any particular client has gone through. And that mostly is done through something like medical records, if there's records of painkillers that are prescribed, how long those painkillers are prescribed to the person who was hurt in some kind of accident, and what kind of painkillers are they? Are they opioids? Are they just regular things like aspirin? Is it, and then that goes into other complications. So is somebody actually becoming addicted to the opioids because they have to use it so much that they can't really get off the opioid? So that leads
Mhm.
into other problems and other costs. But it's really something that is somewhat subjective, with those three words as a guide: fair, reasonable, and just.
And that there's gray area there too, right? I mean, there just it depends on who you are.
Yeah, it is very subjective in that sense. And I think it should be that way. I think that's really right, because an injury to one person is not going to affect that one person like it will another.
Absolutely, your trumpet
So
example is perfect.
yeah, the person playing a trumpet, or even like the soccer player, if you have an injury to your toe, I mean, look, the way I think about it is, when you're presenting to a jury, you really have to get it so that it's relatable to a jury. So if I said to a jury something like, whether or not they had like a rock, or like a pebble in their shoe, and they're walking, let's say, and if they think about that pebble, it's so small, and it's such a minor part of your body. It's not like your eye, it's not your nose, it's not the tips of your fingers, it's not something that you really sense, so it really doesn't seem to impact you a lot. But that little pebble does so much to bother you that it makes you take off your shoe and empty the pebble out of your shoe. Okay, now imagine somebody hurting their neck or their back, and it's not a fracture, it's not something that needs operations, but It's that constant nagging pain
Mhm.
in your neck, in your back, just like the pebble is. But the thing is that you can't take the pebble out of your neck. You can't take the pebble out of your back. So you have to live with that the rest of your life. And if you're talking about somebody that's, say, 20 or 30 years old, you could be talking a good 50 years of future like that, living like that, and maybe even getting worse.
Going back to the economic damages, you talked about lost wages while you were out and stuff. What about future issues, future lost wages, future medical bills? How is that handled in these cases?
Yeah, that's also something that we really have to take into consideration when we're talking about economic damages. So, if a doctor says, "Okay, look, as a result of the accident, you're hurt, and this is what you have to do to get better," say physical therapy, occupational therapy, these are the medications you require. Maybe that'll end, and maybe that won't end. But if a doctor says that's going to last for the rest of your life, then we, as the lawyers, go out and we hire the various experts that are required to say these are the costs. And not only are these the costs, but we have to also project things like interest rates or inflation. So what will cost you, say, $1 today isn't going to cost you $1 next year. It's going to cost you, say, $1.10, and then the next year it's going to
Especially
cost you
these
a dollar.
days, who the heck knows what where things are going with prices all over the place. So yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense,
And how do you account for something like a tariff?
right?
So,
Yeah, yeah.
it really, a lot of these things drive up costs. And so we have to hire the right experts to project out over a certain number of years how much this person is going to have to pay out of their own pocket. We present that to a jury through these experts, and that's when we ask the jury for this kind of money.
What are some of the challenges that you face or that attorneys face specifically when trying to show the impact of non-economic damages?
Well, non-economic damages really could be something that goes beyond what is actually the injury to the person. So, what I learned, I used to be a paramedic. I used to volunteer as a paramedic, and I saw that, in an emergency situation, let's say, you really have to give other people something to do because that actually makes them feel better and stops the panic and stops the snowball from rolling down the hill and making things
Mhm.
worse. So you have to treat the patient and you have to treat the people around the patient because they love them so much. So the same kind of thing goes for somebody who's suffering these non-economic damages, right? So you really have to take into consideration not only the injury and the pain and the suffering this person has been through by having to go to these appointments, the loss of time, the loss of energy, simple things that they once did and can no longer do, or at least they can't do as well as they did before the accident. But you also have to be able to present to the jury how it's affected the people involved. Maybe it's their mother, maybe it's their father, maybe it's their kids that now have to take on more of a burden in their lives over years to take care of this person who's injured as a result of the negligence of somebody else. So that really has to be presented to a jury as well.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. That definitely is a different type of a trial, I would imagine, when you're trying to prove non-economic damages.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to a trial that that a lot of people don't think of when they have the accident and when they're hiring a lawyer. So it's important that when you're hiring a lawyer that they understand all of these aspects. I mean, I've been doing this for about 3 decades, so I've seen a lot, and I really try to get into the lives of the not only the person who I'm representing, but their families. And I think it's really important to get to know not only the person who's injured, but also their families, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to explain it to a jury.
Yeah. You mentioned that there's an appeal process too afterwards so that a lot of times the award will get reduced. Do
Yeah,
you have to what is your role during that process? Are you involved in that, or is that a different attorney that gets involved then?
no, 100% that we're involved, and it's actually rather interesting because it goes by something known as venues and departments. So essentially, what that means is that the area that your attorney picks to try your case is very, very important. So in my area, let's say, if you have a case and you can select the county of Bronx County, New York, as a place to try your case as a plaintiff, you want that area because those people have been shown to be much more understanding of what an injury is and how it affects people. Whereas if you cross an imaginary line, which is a border between the Bronx County, and Westchester County, slightly to the north, then the value of your case will be totally different and totally less. So the attorney that you select really has to understand the importance of that and be familiar with the area. So if you hire a lawyer from like Missouri to try a case in New York, they're probably not going to know these little intricacies, these
Right.
little idiosyncrasies. So it does depend upon where you select to try your case. That's one thing. And also it will depend upon what department you go to when you appeal a case. So the process of appealing a case and going up to an appellate court really has to do with where it was tried initially. There's 4 departments in New York State: first, second, third, and fourth departments. That's the initial appeals process. So the first department contains the Bronx and also Manhattan. So if your case is tried there, the appellate courts are, say, more understanding and will evaluate your case in a different way than, say, the second department, where Westchester is. That's the county a little bit north, or some other counties where other cases may have to be tried.
And I know that a lot of times, the cases are settled before they go to trial. When you get non-economic damages involved, does that make it less likely to settle in your experience?
Well, it all depends upon how you present it to the insurance company and defense counsel.
Hmm.
So if you select an attorney that's not really used to going to trial, then they're not going to prepare to go to trial. And if you're not preparing to go to trial, that's really going to show. It's going to be known to defense counsel, it's going to be known to insurance adjusters, and you get a reputation in this business pretty quickly. So you better know what you're doing, and you better prepare every case like it's going to trial. I'm not saying every case actually does go to trial, because a very small percentage of cases actually goes to trial. I'm going to say less than 5. I'm going to even say less than 4% of cases, of personal injury cases, actually go to trial. But you have to prepare like you're going to trial. So when you're talking to the adjuster, when you're talking to defense counsel, you better have these economic damages in line. You better have your non-economic presentation in line. You better have your witness statements. You better have your photographs, because as you prepare for trial, the other side, the defense counsel, insurance adjusters, they will know how serious you are, and they will take your case much more seriously, and you have a better shot of settling out of court.
A lot of times I feel like people a lot of times it's guys, we tend to, maybe say, oh, I'm fine. Maybe I just got my bell rung whatever. We grew up people, playing sports, and people saying, rub some dirt on it, walk it off, you'll be fine. For riders who kind of think that after an accident, oh, I'll be fine, I don't need to worry about that, it's not a big deal, yeah, I'm in pain. What do you want them to know about protecting their future?
Listen, if you're hurt in any kind of accident, the most important thing is to take care of yourself. Your health is the most important, because without your health, you can't do anything else. And I feel like I'm different than many of the lawyers in that respect, because I'm very concerned about where my clients are getting treatment, if they're going to the right doctors, and what kind of treatment this doctor actually proposes. So if you're hurt, act immediately. Don't think that it's going to go away. Act as if it's not going to go away. The worst thing that will happen is you'll go to a doctor, and the doctor will say, you're going to be fine. The best thing that's going to happen is that you're going to go to a doctor, and you're going to get early intervention for your injury, and maybe prevent an injury that's worse over time. Now, of
Right.
course, it's a double-edged sword. Okay. Because if you go to a doctor and they actually get you better faster because you went to a doctor when you were supposed to, that means that there's less pain and suffering. So that means less money for you at the end of the case. Okay. But it could also mean more money because you're documenting it a little better.
Right.
But at the end of the day, what I would want, if I was hurt in an accident, I would love to be able to turn back the hands of time and not be hurt at all and make it
Right.
all go away. But we can't do that. We know we can't do that. So the best thing that we can do is try to get better and try to get back to pre-accident status. And the best way to do that is go to a doctor as soon as you possibly can. In New York, there's no fault insurance that will pay for these medical bills. So no money is going to come out of your pocket, very likely. And you're going to get the care that you need and get back to your life faster than you would have if you waited a week, waited a month. So the best thing to do, honestly, is get to some medical care and call me as soon as you possibly can.
Well, great tips. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on our Law Office of Cohen and Jaffe podcast. If you'd like to connect with Richard, head to cohenjaffe.com, and please like our videos and subscribe to our channel. We got lots more great information coming your way. Rich, it was so good chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much for talking about these really important topics. And that's a wrap for this episode of Riding Counsel with Richard Jaffe. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your fellow riders. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and ride safe.